Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to be looking more at BattleTech lore, The Age of War by Sven Vanderplank. This time around, we're looking at the Capellan zone collapse and a campaign of persuasion, which Capellan being the good guys, that is apparently a thing that happened during the Age of War. This feels weird, and I'm glad he's going into this right now because I would not believe it if I read it. I just think I was maybe up too late and hallucinated the entire thing. So, welcome everyone to Airier's delusion about how BattleTech lore definitely isn't completely screwing with his head. If you're actually here, type 1. If you're not, type 1. I won't know the difference. More importantly, we're just going to jump in and see what happens. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up, and let's get started.
When James McKenna was elected Director General at the beginning of 2316, he soon made it known that his ambition was to see all of humanity reunited under the auspices of the Terran Hegemony. His first action was to ensure the existing member planets of the old alliance transitioned to the new hegemony, which he achieved in short order, only on a couple of occasions having to resort.
So he actually did want to re-expand it to what would probably become the Star League and did achieve that goal. Okay, because I was under the impression that that stopped being their goal for most time. I mean, I guess it makes sense that someone still wanted to do it, but really? This early on, they already wanted to get back what they already kind of willingly gave up? And may or may not have never actually had, if we really think about who actually controlled it.
To the threat of violence. Not all of his immediate neighbours were keen to join, however.
Years.
Many had learned to get by just fine in the 75 years that had passed since the Demarcation Declaration.
Yeah.
Sensing the way the winds were blowing, the worlds of Airier, Quinton, and Helen entered into a mutual protection pact in an effort to dissuade the Terran hegemony from moving in their direction.
Okay, I'm just gonna... That's... Okay, it's a slightly lighter gray. I honestly wouldn't have told that at first or even noticed it, but okay, sure. Would not have understood otherwise, wow.
McKenna was unimpressed, and in March launched his first crusade that would see him utterly
and they're connected
on these worlds and absorb them into the hegemony. The short-lived Dayron Federation.
A guy on Terra taking power of the entire planet and launching a crusade to add more worlds. Nope, doesn't ring a bell, never heard this one before.
Was incorporated more peacefully. By the end of 2317, several more planets
so they're expanding again.
Though the cost had been unexpectedly high, the Director General began formulating plans for a second wave.
But
around them, the independent worlds began to worry. Suddenly, many of the interplanetary squabbles and rivalries that had occupied them over the last few decades were shown to be irrelevant in the face of the outwards expanding hegemony. The changing fortunes for those on Terra became a unifying force for other governments across the inner sphere.
Oh?
In the Crucis Reach, Lucian Davian embarked on a voyage that would see him meet the leaders of several surrounding worlds. Inviting each of them to join him at a conference on Delavan, there the government...
Also, I just want to throw out on the record, it is so weird to see what becomes Davion as small. Usually they're the expansionist and, you know, maybe not always successful, but the biggest faction, at least in terms of sheer number of planets and area of the nearest sphere. One world is just weird to see. I'm not the only one thinking that, right?
Met to hammer out the details of a new alliance and together signed the Crucis Pact.
That was fast. 20
of those present would sign, though notably Muskegon and Marlette were 2 of the 3 that politely declined and left without doing so.
Oh?
In 2317, the Federated Suns was born, with Lucian Davian at its head. 1 year later, in 2318, the Muskegon Empire had a change of heart and willingly joined the Federated Suns.
Why?
However, dissent among the worker class of this dictatorship increased as they were made aware yet again of how little control they had over their lives.
Because technically Davion would still be a dictatorship at this point, and technically I think it always is. They're just more of a dictator at the top that has a more democratic structure underneath it, to varying extents of believability.
Several decades of trade between the worlds of Baton Katos and Emerson with the neighbouring Chesterton League have resulted in the formation of strong ties with that body. They now declare their independence from the Muskegon Empire, and by extension the Federated Suns.
Okay, so the Muskegon Empire must have been much bigger than just Muskegon then, which, you know, Empire. And apparently things are just not always showing up until they're creating other factions.
And immediately joined the much smaller Chesterton Alliance.
Oh.
Lucian Davian, who was one of the most skilled diplomats of his day, now flexed his military muscles and called on the planets of the Federated Suns to raise an army with which to take back these worlds. Their subsequent invasion couldn't have gone much worse and resulted in a humiliating defeat for the Suns at the hands of the much smaller Chesterton League.
Something, Davian stretching too far and getting beat, something, hey, nothing changed.
In accord with direction, Shiro Kurita was ready to dispense with all pretense and declared the founding of his new dynasty. In December of 2319, the old Alliance of Galadon was officially disbanded and the new Draconis Combine would take its place.
Oh, wait, they weren't already official? Huh. I'll be completely honest, I thought they had already announced that.
House Kurita
technically, Kurita was later, even if technically they weren't.
In 2320, James McKenna began the next wave of the conquest for the Terran Hegemony. By this point, he had established a standard operating procedure for the invasion of worlds. First, a fleet of warships would arrive in system and dispatch any resistance at the jump points. Only after control had been established were the troop transports waiting at a neighbouring star called in. Afterwards, the Hegemony armed forces...
So basically, it's siege protocols. You get in, you make sure no one gets in or out, and then you just make sure people have their leisure to do anything they want to take over. And for smaller independent planets that don't have anyone they can call on, that's probably unbeatable. Because they can just refresh their troops at their leisure if they want to use troops. And from what I've heard, due to lack of war crimes at this period, that's apparently what they're really waiting on, because they're not going to go full dead world on it. Huh.
Would take complete control of the space immediately above the target world before finally landing troops on the ground.
Yeah,
it was
air superiority or space superiority, man. It's a good thing.
Off, but it significantly reduced casualties. However successful the invasions were, McKenna began to realize that the task of uniting the inner sphere was beyond even his abilities by this.
I mean, if he's taking, what, how long? Months? Even weeks, considering that's how... I think it takes, what, a week for a ship to... or a jump ship to charge up again, or was it a month? I don't remember. I think it was a week. If it's just one ship, and it's probably not one because it's all the jump points, so it's probably multiple, that's a lot of energy being put on single worlds. He's not going to expand in his entire years. I mean, technically his, what, I think it's 6 descendants down? No. He's a McKenna, not... Oh, yeah. Whatever happened to his line anyways? We're probably going to find out.
At this point, he toned down his expansionist rhetoric and dispatched ambassadors to what he considered to be the significant interstellar nations.
Who did he consider?
The Free Worlds League and Federated Suns were pleased to welcome these ambassadors and establish new trade deals with
not Kurita.
The Draconis Combine responded a little more coolly. They had their own ambitions of galactic conquest after all.
And they probably know a snake when they see one, because they are very much literal snakes in the Combine. That's literally the thing, the worm. I know it's supposed to be a dragon, but I'm going to just call it a snake because, yeah, details. Huh. I'm surprised they didn't return the head in a box, though.
The two signed a neutrality agreement and agreed to stay out of each other's way. One group that was not invited to the talks was the Capellan Commonality, that group of loosely affiliated nations within the Capellan zone. McKenna viewed them as insignificant pretenders and immediately took the side of the Federated Suns.
I mean... Lao just spends its entire time, even when they're not even Lao yet, getting shat on. Also, I realize I'm using Lao and Capellan interchangeably, and technically that's not the case because it's not all there yet. It's just how I think of it. I'm not going to get that out of my head by the time this video finishes.
Recently concluded a deal to peacefully absorb the Milet Association and the Free Worlds League in all disputes. He also geared up for further expansion in that direction himself. First to make a move, however, was the Draconis Combine. Next in their sights was the peaceful Principality of Rasalhague. Oh,
this happened really early on, huh? I know about Rasalhague, however, being the start of the Steiner space, being founded here and then being taken over by Kurita, which really is the driving animosity between the two factions, other than just Kurita being Kurita. Although I'm sure that plays a massive part in it. But apparently they're setting their sights here well before having everyone around there. Although considering he doesn't color all these, there might be a good chance that some of these are actually within the sphere of someone else's control and they're just not shown yet.
In 2330, they kicked off what all anticipated would be a short campaign.
But
initial progress was good, with Rasalhague constantly caught by surprise. The defenders were anticipating an attack on their capital, but it never came. Instead, they were losing their planets piecemeal. In preparation for their next attack, the Kuritans began to stockpile weapons on New Bergen, which in 2334 was under the joint command of Urizen's two oldest sons. Tragedy struck for the Kurita family when a group of Rasalhagians landed on planet and conducted a surprise raid. Both brothers were killed and the supplies seized.
I'm pretty sure that's literally the plot of the newest expansion, Rise of Rasalhague and MechWarrior 5. A son from the Cronus Combine is trying to take back Rasalhague. We must kill him. Except it's only the one son instead of two. It's basically the plotline here.
This single counterattack resulted in decades of repercussions for both sides.
Oh?
The Principality now had the means to continue to fight the Draconis Combine almost indefinitely using guerrilla tactics. Urizen too never recovered from the loss of his sons and died a few years later.
Oh, really? Honestly, he came off as such a, well, bastard. I'm kind of surprised he cared about family. I literally thought he would be the one who's like, you failed me. I don't have sons. I never did. They were pretenders. No, apparently he had a heart, and that's what got him. Was not expecting that.
Followed by his brother Shiro in 2348. In 67, Shiro's son Tenno declared the Combine's victory over Rasalhague, but in reality the outcome was a stalemate. Rasalhague managed to keep their independence in the end, at the cost of having the Kurita family installed as governors, and also had to accept the Draconis military units within their borders.
Okay, so they've already been taken over at this point. I'm assuming since Steiner hasn't actually been created, then Steiner has a very large presence here in its initial creation, there's going to be changing ownership multiple times,
forming the basis of what will become the Rasalhague military district. Jumping back to 2332, the Capellans were taking advantage of the weakness of the Federated Suns military and seized a handful of worlds. Seeing the nation he'd worked so hard to build start to fall apart, Lucian Davian retired his presidency and passed away a few months later.
Again, people actually stepping aside. That's not what I was expecting. Also, yeah, that does further show that while they might not be colored Steiner prior to this, or sorry, not Steiner, Davian prior to this, they're very much in the sphere of control. It does actually change things.
His brother Charles took control of the Federated Suns after his retirement and immediately put pressure on the Terran Hegemony to begin the next wave of their military conquests.
What?
The Capellans were forced to scale back their assaults in 2330.
Oh, you son of a bitch. So what he did, it wasn't that, I'm going to take them back. It's, you're not going to attack us because they're attacking you and they have more of an army. So yeah, you can beat us. But if you beat us, you're not fighting to save your own skins up north where they're going to take over a lot more than we could ever fight back. Take your pick. It's literally just making sure there's a bigger stick somewhere else and it's about to hit you in the face. Is that a method I'm going to be using anytime soon? Oh no, we'll have to find out.
35, when the hegemony started to move, and by the following year Davian had retaken several of the Lost Worlds. Two of the main targets
of the stick policy
campaign were within the borders
ignore the smaller one.
of Sky, though not strictly members of that nation.
Oh?
Initially, the third wave went as planned, but it was during this campaign that McKenna's son Conrad rose to command within the HAF.
Oh?
As they closed in on their final goal in 2338, Conrad increasingly disregarded standard operating procedure during the invasions. A mixture of arrogance and complacency played a part in the catastrophe that followed.
Yeah. Wow, will you look at that? Someone who's in power and is successful but taking it slow has an idiot son who's put in charge. And they're in charge of the hegemony and it backfires. I mean, was there someone from the Rim here giving them bad advice just to make it too very specific?
As the hegemony fleet appeared in system, they found themselves surrounded by an enormous minefield with dozens of remote-activated missiles set off by the ensuing blasts. Unable to clear the jump point, the troop transports, which had been commanded to follow immediately
the jumps
behind,
will probably be destroyed
materialized right on top of and inside the floundering first wave.
Oh. When they say inside, do they mean they jumped into each other, like physically merging and then explosive results, or just within the formation? One is kind of effed up. The other is very messed up, and I would actually be really interested to see how BattleTech represents things being fused like that. Explosive or fissionable, or possibly even just new materials due to the sudden excess mass in material. I've seen a few people talk about it that way, but most don't.
Conrad shifted the blame onto his fellow admirals in the aftermath, and was soon facing a mutiny when he threatened to execute the senior officers. It was at this point—
I'm sorry, he fucked up and he threatened to kill everyone else? You know what, no, this is perfectly in line for the level of stupid I expect.
That James McKenna himself unexpectedly arrived, the news having reached him on Earth, and relieved his son of command.
Oh!
What was left of the fleet was ordered back to Earth.
That's actually smart.
The Director General was the last to leave the system, lingering for 3 hours as he surveyed the carnage. In the ensuing months, McKenna was stepped down as the head of the Hegemony.
This is the one time I won't actually believe that's the right choice. I mean, so far everyone here has stepped down. There hasn't been that many assassinations by comparison, except for family members. And most of the leaders who established what these houses essentially are either died or stepped down. And McKenna's probably the one I would think doesn't need to, because he made the right choice to slap his son around. On the other hand, he's the idiot who probably put his son in charge and no one questioned it because boss man said to in a dictatorship. Yeah. I would love if there was more literature here about what kind of decision making was going on during this time period. That'd be so freaking fun. I'm probably the only person who would actually get that, but I would love that, man.
And died later that year. In his place, a distant relative, Michael Cameron, was elected the second Director General. With the ascension of House Cameron, the Inner Sphere would see the birth of another ruling dynasty at the head of a major state.
If his son died, whatever happened to the McKennans? I'm actually curious now, is that like one of those families that definitely does still exist, no one talks about? Or I just haven't heard about it yet? If you know, let me know. I'm actually very curious.
Lastly, the 2330s would also see some major changes in the Periphery. By 2335, the newly rechristened Taurian Concordat had expanded significantly, though contact with the outside world was limited to a very small group of traders from the Capellan zone. The biggest fear for the...
Wait. Oh, this is weird. So during this time period, they're isolationists, nothing new there, and they're on good terms enough to trade with what becomes Lao, or just the Capellans at this time. Yeah, I know, it's weird because the Capellans are still up and up the good guys. I'm just going to have to take a second and wrap my head around this later, but yeah.
Calderon family was aggression from the Federated Sons, and because of that, they chose to keep their existence hidden.
Oh?
Across the Inner Sphere, the Rimworld's Republic had begun to expand in 2334, and by 38 now had more than a dozen worlds. Eventually, they came into contact with the Tamar Pact, were able to establish friendly relations, the two sides both more concerned about where the Draconis Combine would go next after the Principality.
Smart move. Also, just hearing all these players that I'm used to hearing about being created is so freaking cool, man.
Rasalhague fell.
I just saw that really anywhere. The planet is named Anywhere.
Concerned about where the Draconis Combine would go next after the Principality of Rasalhague fell.
And then there's here right next to it.
Fear that the Tamars finally acted on something that had been whispered about for some years.
Oh?
Reaching out to the Federation of Sky and the Protectorate of Donegal, they called for an alliance between the three powers to defend from outward aggression. Sky had only recently been threatened by the Terran hegemony, so had added impetus to join these talks.
Yeah?
Donegal, Sky, and Tamar were in agreement on many things, but struggled somewhat to reach consensus on how their new alliance would function. The compromise they settled on was intended to give each member nation a fair say, but would result in somewhat ineffectual leadership. Nevertheless, on January 5th, 2341, the Terran Alliance officially recognized the founding of the Lyran Commonwealth.
Wait, that's a way to phrase it. The what?
5th, 2341, the Terran Alliance officially recognized the founding of the Lyran Commonwealth.
So it's the Terran Alliance is recognizing the Lyran Commonwealth. Also, the Lyrans, is it just me or does their symbol look different than I'm used to? Maybe I'm just crazy. I mean, I'm definitely crazy. But more importantly, I wonder why he phrased it that the Terran Alliance specifically recognized it rather than they did. I guess we're still kind of working on an Earth-centric perspective then. Huh. Also, would that make them by default the biggest group then? Also, there's an easy joke in there about, hey, ineffective leadership in Steiner space. No, too easy. I'm not going to make it.
All eyes and ambitions were now focused on the Capellan zone. Lucian's
because
son
everywhere
Reynard
else is too united.
took control of the Federated Sons on the 21st of May 2340, after the death of his uncle Charles. Reynard was much more military-minded than the previous generation of Davians, and sought to bring the new might of his nation to bear against the Capellans. During Charles's reign, he had founded the Federated Peacekeeping Forces, a predecessor to the current-day
Peacekeeping. How very American of you.
FS, and used them to retake some of the worlds that had been lost. Now they had new targets.
Oh?
When the Milat Association had joined the Federated Suns, they brought with them their rivalry with Tikhonov. Seeking to settle old scores, Reynard began his campaign in 2344, targeting several worlds in the Chesterton province of the
Oh, they just got it
Grand
that far already?
The Union was in decline at this point, and after resisting for only a year, in 2345 signed the Almac Accords, handing control of the disputed planets over to the Federated Suns.
Oh.
They then cemented these territorial gains by concluding the Akala Pact with a Capellan commonality, ensuring that they would not support their ally in a counter-invasion. Sensing blood in the water, the always aggressive Sarno Supremacy launched their own invasion of the Tikhonov Grand Union in 2351. By the end of the following year, the Supremacy had taken control of the remaining Chesterton worlds.
I gotta wonder, but is Sarna, and this feels weird to say considering Sarna's the repository of everything BattleTech outside of the game, is Sarna basically the cancer inside of Lao? Because it seems like they are literally all the dumb ideas about everything Lao becomes better at. It feels so weird. Like, where is the initial poison in their society that we're apparently going to find out eventually?
Both sides petitioned the Capellan commonality to support them in their case for ownership over these planets, and when help was not forthcoming, entered their own candidates into the running for governorship of what was essentially a foreign realm. Continued involvement of foreign powers in the election process eroded the common people's faith in the democratic process, until few believed that the commonality was sustainable.
They were still democratic? Democratic and open Capellans. And people were worried about it not... I mean, yes, but also coming from a perspective of everything Lao normally... This is basically just like going, see how peaceful everything is? It's like we're talking about war and planetary conquest and blood and fighting and competence and triumphs and horrible defeats. And I'm just sitting here going like, yeah, that's kind of cute. Because it's just so much more scaled down. And this kind of just hammers it home because just a little bit of bullshittery by comparison to what comes later. And what comes later is literally giant piles of do it or die. And I don't really care who I'm talking about because it's kind of accurate everywhere in the inner sphere. It's really a horrible place. Really, really horrible place when you come to think about it. In most places. There are some nice ones, just ones who are not currently fighting.
The Federated Suns invasion of 2357 brought the reality of their situation sharply back into focus. Several worlds were taken, including Chesterton, and as a result of the fiasco, the government collapsed. In its place, a new one formed under the leadership of Seluk Tukas, who was able to assuage the rulers of Sarna and Tikhonov by supporting the former in their recent acquisitions, and promising the latter a renewed campaign to retake the worlds lost to House Davian. Tukas' immediate response was to send forces to the planet Bell, but upon arrival, they found the colony completely deserted.
What?
2363 was the year chosen.
Okay, wow, that changed things. I guess this is more just updating the map to look correct, but... Whoa.
For the counterattack on the Federated Suns. Renouncing the Akala and Almac Accords, the commonality went on the offensive, sending 8 crack regiments from Capella, St. Ives and Tikhonov to the planet Lee as the first step of their grand invasion. This was as far as they would go, however, as elements within the Supremacy government had leaked plans to the Federated Suns. Waiting for them on Lee were
Wait, why would they? Because they wanted an opportunity to take power, and if the people in charge lose face by losing lives, then they can probably make their own play. Okay, that makes sense.
10 regiments of Davian's finest. The ensuing bloodbath saw precious few of the commonality forces escape. Tukas would not long outlive them, and was assassinated in February 2365.
Yep.
The Airier family, dormant since the Hegemony Supremacy War, saw this moment to retake control of the region, but faced unexpectedly stiff opposition from their rivals in House Liao. At the conference held to discuss the future of the Capellan's own nation, the mood was grim, as word had just reached the delegates that Reynard Davian had dispatched his fleet to Capella to ensure the validity of the next election. As the others bickered,
he dispatched his fleet for the Capellan election. Oh, wow. You can see, though, things are starting to form up. You can see what's basically the Free Worlds League, and it looks as effed up as you expect. You can see what's going to become Lao, but it's still not quite there yet. And you can see the beginning of Davian, which is really forming as a giant FU to Lao. Or what becomes Lao, and is currently just Capellan, Sarna, and all the other various, not entirely, but kind of will be allies, though. Eventually may or may not beat over the head to make sure they listen to them at all costs.
Franco Liao made the bold suggestion to disband the commonality entirely.
Yep.
In its place would rise the Capellan Confederation.
Yeah, wait. That's their initial logo? A furry beach ball? Or a beach ball with hair? It actually looks like not even a beach ball. It looks like a freaking helmet with a bunch of fancy ribbons. Just not expecting that. I know it's supposed to be like the shooting star spinning in space, but no.
Strong, unified nation under the control of a single central figure. This new nation would be powerful enough to resist Davian aggression, he promised. The alternative was that he would use his extensive merchant navy to blockade all key worlds within the zone.
And I'm sure that would have worked out. Just long enough for Davian to probably fuck over anyone they wanted, so it's not a threat he needs to hold out on long. So, yeah, a threat that everyone knows better to call you on because they know you don't have to really carry it out, because even a few days of bullshit is more than enough, probably. And by days, I mean it would probably just be a few weeks, and they definitely wouldn't leak anything to Davian saying, hey, by the way, if you start attacking right now, no one's going to be able to respond to show a point, which they already did. I'm sure it's completely unrelated, and with the usual backstabbery, this actually makes a lot more sense. So you can see how they're starting to connect in the actual lining there. I like that, showing how they're starting to pull together.
His motion passed with a unanimous but one vote. After officially disbanding the commonality, he extended an olive branch to Warren Aris, offering to make him deputy chancellor.
He assassinates him immediately, doesn't he? Yeah, just calling it now.
Aris threw the offer back in his face, so instead, he had him executed.
Okay, close enough.
Racing to Capella, Liao evacuated as many and as much as he could before the arrival of the Federated Sun's fleet, leaving the system himself only hours before they appeared. The Davians soon moved into the deserted city. The Liao fleet jumped back in behind them, confident that they would not fire upon their own city and civilians. The Davian...
You know what? That sounds stupid from a later BattleTech perspective, but after everything we've heard right now, we're not going to fire on civilians, actually sounds believable, so I can understand why they're doing it at this time period. Later on, every single one of them would be fine with absolutely massacring their own people if it meant they get to win. Because that's basically what they do. It's kind of disgusting, really, when you think about it.
The commander refused to surrender and made plans to contact New Avalon. Franco never gave him the opportunity. Every weapon available was fired upon Capella Prime, devastating the city, those left behind, and the FBF forces. In the aftermath, the Confederacy capital was moved to Siam.
And the first giant pile of war crimes goes to Davian. I'm sure there's you know what? No, actually, they were having wars prior to that, but just fighting on an empty city. They just left a bunch of people behind. Yeah, no. This is probably the first out-and-out war crime that's been described. I'm sure there's probably been others, but this is the first one that's really come up. Even Kurita, for all their bullshittery, wasn't doing out-and-out war crimes. It was just doing crimes. It's a very small difference, but a very important one.
But it remains to this present day. Though most of the nations within the Capellan zone ratified the foundation of the Confederacy, it was now the turn of the Tikhonovs to act contentiously. The Grand Union would outlive the other states, which were now rebranded as commonalities within the Greater Confederacy. And the two groups initially maintained an awkward semi-independent neutrality. The nobility of Tikhonov turned to creating private armies to defy laws coming from Siam. Franco decided...
So they're basically the equivalent of Rasalhague for the Kurita at this time point. It's like, yeah, you're part of us. Okay, that makes more sense.
To make an example of one especially troublesome unit known as Tormasov's Galactic Rangers. He maneuvered his own forces onto their planet and attacked the gang, chasing them off-world. As they fled, they unknowingly entered the Taurian Concordat, where they were shocked to come into contact with what was at the time an unknown nation.
Because they were completely isolated, and they kept that intentionally, except for a bit of, I think it was Capella that they traded with. And while that technically their Tikhonov is part of that union, the people there probably wouldn't realize because they're basically the equivalent of trustworthy allies. And the people they're fighting against definitely wouldn't know as well, and I'm assuming this is going to start a fight.
As Tormasov discussed an alliance with this new group, the Capellans arrived. In the confusion, the Tikhonov unit was able to steal several Taurian jump ships, and made their next move into Davian space, where they were finally destroyed.
Oh, are you serious? So the initial conflict that makes everyone hate everyone in this corner, other than, just already hating them, but specifically between Taurians and everyone, is a bunch of assholes in the north of what is currently Capellan space, drop down, find here, and steal warships from the people they're talking to, while they're probably fighting the chasing forces who don't know about them from the group that does know about them. And then they flee into Davian space where they're destroyed, and then the Davians probably think, hey, jump ships from here that don't look like anything we know, because I'm assuming they can find debris. And they're probably going to find this, and it'll be a bunch of, hey, you just destroyed our warships. Yeah, your warships just jumped into our space, and we had to destroy them. Or maybe someone else. I don't know. Just like, this is a whole hornet nest of just cause and effect, isn't it?
Seeking the source of this presumed Capellan raid, Reynard Davian moved rimward and stumbled upon the Concordat himself. Not recognizing them as an independent nation, he attacked. At last, the cover had been blown, and the Taurians were forced to fight back. The ensuing short war saw both the Federated Sons and the Taurian Concordat develop a lasting hatred for each other. The conflict only ended with the death of Reynard Davian in 2371.
Oh.
On the opposite side of the sphere, Robert Marsden launched a coup to take complete control of the Lyran Commonwealth. Disgusted by the way the ruling Archons were taking advantage of the
the Lyran Commonwealth. Never would assume there would be a coup here. Granted, I usually say more of the treachery thing in Lao just because the police state aspect, but I know, the joking aside, it's really this area. They're just a pile of malcontents. It was also one of the reasons I like their faction.
Economic crisis that was bankrupting millions of citizens, he was finally able to forge the Commonwealth into a functional nation.
He was?
Tamara and Skye at first resisted, but Marsden dispatched his military forces, loyal from his prior service, to crush them into submission.
Yeah, usually that would do it, and we're getting more to the listen to me because gun style of control in the inner sphere, which is more what I'm used to. And there's Tukid. It's kind of weird that no one's actually claimed that yet. I mean, I know it's not a major planet, and it doesn't become one until the clan invasion, but just weird. I thought someone just picked it up by now. On the other hand, we're describing someone in Steiner space competent. Granted, we're talking about a single independent person who is well known, and I've been told that most people who come up in this area, even in current times, are horrible, but when they have someone who's good, it's really damn good. So basically, if they're named, they're probably worth it. It's basically it's main character syndrome, not NPC syndrome. It's literally main character syndrome. You can always tell which one of the Steiners is it, because they have the crazy hair. Yeah, I'm not sure if that actually was true, but is Fucked from here? I don't actually remember where he's from.
The looming threat of a Kurita attack kept the realm from flying apart. A period of peace settled on the galaxy in the wake of the hostilities. Nobody knew it at the time, but this was nothing but a brief respite before the devastating Age of...
Oh, this is what it looks like? So the entire sphere, and then... They really have been focusing more on the Rimworld side, huh? And the Hegemony is actually a lot bigger than I thought at this point, but it probably only appears that way because the rest of what becomes the Periphery and the successor states, which aren't even successor at this point, because there's nothing to succeed yet, aren't there. And Davian really did just form up to say F you to Lao. Kind of surprised no one's really... Davian and Kurita just haven't really fought much. Kind of expected more of that. But then again, they're all sort of allied with this, and they don't want to fuck around, and...
War that would follow.
And by the sound of it, we have finally caught up to what is essentially the end of the beginning. We have come to all of the houses, all of the main players put in place, and now we get to go to the actual Age of War proper. The time period where shit goes down, everyone's fighting, and BattleTech really starts to become BattleTech. Everything that forges the Star League falls apart, forges the clans, forges the successor states, and really sets the stage for what this faction, what all these different groups, what this setting is well known for. And honestly, I kind of love this because it's defying my expectations and showing how everyone starts one way and is transferring into something else, except for Kurita, which honestly, they're pretty true to form. They're a little more sneaky early on and a little more devious and a lot more political than I was expecting, but very much the I have gun, fuck you, that I was really expecting. And yeah, other than that, it's kind of not lining up with my thought process. And it's cool to see them shift from being one way, in some cases incredibly idealistic, into something more BattleTech, which is just war crime o'clock. BattleTech, the one place where technically it's not nearly as high stakes as Warhammer, but yet when you really think about it, they've probably destroyed more planets on record frequently. Yeah, it's weird when you really think about it. So we're going to cut this one here and come back for something that I'm really looking forward to, because we get into the main bullshittery proper, and that's going to be freaking cool, man. So if you haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. Hit up Sven. He's doing an amazing job, and I really like doing this. And if you haven't, well, do that. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.